On Fifth Avenue in New York City, there is an apartment with 42 rooms. For over 20 years, nobody lived in it. No lights turned on. No guests. No footsteps. But someone was paying the bills the whole time. Inside, wrapped in plastic and packed into crates, sat paintings worth millions of dollars. Rare violins. A dollhouse collection worth more than most people's homes. The woman who owned all of it was still alive. She just never came home. Her name was Huguette Clark. And the fortune she was hiding did not start with her. It started with her father, a man who once controlled copper mines, banks, newspapers and railroads across half of the United States. A man some historians believe was, for a time, richer than John D. Rockefeller. And yet, today, almost nobody knows his name. Andrew Carnegie has libraries named after him in almost every American town. Rockefeller has a university, a foundation, a famous name that still opens doors. This man had more cash flowing through his hands some months than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. He built one of the largest private mansions New York City had ever seen, over 100 rooms, with marble shipped from Italy and oak cut from a forest in England. That mansion did not last 100 years. It did not last 50 years. It was gone in less than 20. His companies, his mills, his power plants sold off, torn down or forgotten within 7 years of his death. So here is the question we are going to answer today. How does one of the richest men in American history disappear this completely? And where did all of that money actually go? Because part of it did not disappear. Part of it went into hiding, and it stayed hidden for 84 years, behind 3 locked doors, until a nurse, a lawyer, and a journalist finally found out why. Stay with us to the end, because the answer involves a lonely woman, a stack of unopened mail, and one of the strangest inheritance battles in American history. His name was William Andrews Clark. And this is the true story of the empire he built, and the empire that disappeared right along with him. Documented biography, beat. Keep pace fast, this is still inside the 3-minute hook window. William Andrews Clark was born in 1839 in a small log cabin in Pennsylvania. He was not born rich. His family later moved to Iowa, where young William taught school and studied law just to get by. In 1862, he left all of that behind and went west, chasing gold in Colorado. He did not strike it rich in the gold fields. Almost nobody did. What made Clark different is what he did next. First loop lands right at the 3-minute mark, closing the hook and launching Act 1 proper. Instead of chasing gold like everyone else, Clark noticed something the other miners never did, and it would make him richer than almost any of them. Human story beat. Concrete, physical details for older audience, mules, eggs, tobacco, wagons. Clark realized that miners needed supplies more than they needed luck. So he bought a team of mules and started hauling eggs, tobacco, and basic goods from Salt Lake City into the mining camps of Montana Territory. Simple things. But out in the middle of nowhere, simple things were worth a fortune. He saved what he earned. Then he did something even smarter. He became a banker in the small town of Deer Lodge, Montana, lending money to miners against their claims. When miners could not pay him back, Clark did not forgive the debt. He took the mine, one claim at a time, one loan at a time. A former schoolteacher was quietly becoming the richest man in Montana Territory. But Clark was not satisfied with owning mines. He wanted to own the entire town growing up around them, and one invention happening 2,000 miles away in New Jersey was about to hand him the keys. Copper-Edison connection is documented history. Butte's copper boom directly tied to electrification demand. In 1879, Thomas Edison was perfecting the electric light bulb. Every city in America would soon need one thing to wire up electric power copper. Clark had already bought up struggling mines around Butte, Montana, almost overnight. The metal sitting underneath his land became some of the most valuable rock in the world. He built the first successful smelter in Butte, then a water company, then the first electric light company, then his own railroad, not funded by banks or shareholders, but paid for entirely out of his own pocket. At one point, his personal income was estimated at around $17 million a month in 1890s money. By 1900, Clark's fortune was estimated at $50 million, and it kept growing from there. He owned newspapers in 3 states, sugar plantations in California, oil wells near Long Beach, a wire company in New Jersey, property in Arizona, where he founded an entire company town and named it after himself, Clarkdale. He even owned land in the Nevada desert that later became the foundation for a small railroad stop. Today, that county still carries his name, Clark County, Nevada. You may know its largest city. It's called Las Vegas. Clark now had more money than almost any man in the country, but money was never really what he wanted most. What he wanted next would push him to do something so brazen it would eventually change the U.S. Constitution, documented Montana 1899 legislative bribery scandal, National Archives cash envelopes, Senate refusal to seat him. What Clark wanted was to be called senator. In 1899, Montana's state legislature, not the public, chose the state's U.S. senators, so Clark did not campaign for votes from ordinary people. He went straight to the lawmakers who would decide. Investigators later found envelopes stuffed with cash, handed directly to state legislators in exchange for their vote. Some of those very envelopes are preserved today in the National Archives. When asked about it, Clark did not exactly deny it. He was said to have remarked that he had never bought a man who wasn't already for sale. It worked. The legislature elected him. But word of the bribery reached Washington fast, and the U.S. Senate launched an investigation so damaging that Clark resigned his seat before they could formally throw him out. Most men would have quietly disappeared after a scandal like that. Clark did not. 2 years later, he ran again and won a full term fair and square this time. But the scandal he caused would outlive his entire career, reshaping the U.S. Constitution itself. Documented Clark's Folly, 121 rooms, $7 M cost, imported materials. The scandal was so widely reported that it helped push Congress toward the 17th Amendment. The law that later let ordinary voters, not backroom legislators, choose their own U.S. senators, but Clark, unbothered, kept building his legacy the way he knew best, with stone, marble, and money. In New York City, he began constructing a mansion on Fifth Avenue that took 14 years to finish. It had over 100 rooms, 31 bathrooms, 4 private art galleries, its own swimming pool, even an underground rail line just to haul in coal for heat. He imported marble from Italy, oak from Sherwood Forest in England, pieces of an old French toe shipped across the Atlantic Ocean. He even bought his own stone quarry in New Hampshire and built a private railroad just to move the rock. New Yorkers mocked it. One newspaper critic nicknamed it Clark's Folly. Another writer said it looked like a fitting home for a circus showman. Clark did not care what they called it. This was a monument, built in his mind to last. It was one of the largest private homes ever built in New York City, and it would not survive even 20 years. Documented Clark's first wife, second wife, Anna LaChapelle, daughters Andre and Huguette. Keep tone respectful, not scandalous. By the time his mansion was finished, Clark's personal life had already taken a strange turn. After his first wife passed away, Clark, then in his 60s, quietly married a young woman named Anna LaChapelle, who was less than half his age. He had sent her to Paris years earlier to study harp. Their marriage was kept secret for nearly 3 years before it became public. Together they had 2 daughters. The younger one was named Huguette. In 1919, tragedy struck the family. Huguette's older sister, Andrée, died suddenly of meningitis while still a teenager. It was a loss that would quietly shape the rest of Huguette's life long after her father was gone. Clark was now near the end of his own life, and when he finally passed away, almost everything he built started disappearing faster than anyone expected. Documented death 1925, $200 M estate, mansion demolished 1927, Bonner Milltown assets sold within 7 years, art collection rejected by the Met, no lasting institution bears his name. William Andrews Clark died in March of 1925 at the age of 86, leaving behind a fortune estimated at more than $200 million. His widow and his daughter Huguette moved out of the great Fifth Avenue mansion almost immediately. The house went up for sale, but almost nobody wanted it. It was too enormous, too expensive to maintain, built in a style already going out of fashion. In 1927, barely 2 years after Clark's death, and less than 20 years after it was finished, the mansion was sold for a fraction of what it cost to build. The new owner tore it down completely. An apartment building stands on that spot today. It wasn't only the house. Clark's business empire in Montana was sold off, dismantled, or shut down within about 7 years of his death. The dam, the electric company, the streetcar line, the mills, piece by piece gone. Clark had also spent decades collecting fine art paintings, tapestries, a room known as the Salon d'Or, shipped over piece by piece from a French mansion. His family offered the entire collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. The Met turned it down. It ended up instead at a smaller gallery in Washington, D.C. Much of it has sat in storage ever since, rarely shown to the public. Unlike Carnegie or Rockefeller, Clark left no university, no research foundation, no public library carrying his name forward. The empire, in almost every visible way, vanished with him. But one piece of Clark's fortune did not vanish. It went quiet instead. And it would stay that way for the next 84 years, inside an apartment nobody was allowed to enter. Documented Huguette Clark biography, brief marriage, withdrawal from public life by the 1930s. Huguette Clark was only 18 years old when her father died. She inherited a share of his enormous fortune. For a few years, she tried living the way a wealthy young woman was expected to. She married in 1928. The marriage lasted less than 2 years before it ended in divorce. After that, something in Huguette changed. She began pulling away from public life, first slowly, then almost completely. By the 1930s, she rarely appeared in public at all. She kept a full-floor, 42-room apartment on Fifth Avenue, overlooking Central Park. She lived there for decades, seeing almost no one outside a small circle of staff and, later, medical caretakers. She owned a $24 million estate in Connecticut. She almost never visited it. She owned an even larger oceanfront estate in Santa Barbara, California, worth close to $100 million. She had not set foot there in decades, yet she kept paying staff to maintain it exactly as if she might walk in any day. For most of her later life, Huguette Clark was not even living in her own apartment anymore. She had quietly moved somewhere else, entirely somewhere nobody expected a woman with hundreds of millions of dollars to be. Documented Huguette relocated to hospital rooms from the 1990s while owning multiple empty estates. Details from Empty Mansions / Phantom of Fifth Avenue reporting. Kept general, no verbatim quoting. Beginning in the 1990s, Huguette Clark moved into a New York hospital, choosing to live in a private hospital room rather than any of her own homes. She stayed there for roughly 20 years, even though doctors reportedly found little medically wrong with her. Meanwhile, her Fifth Avenue apartment sat completely empty. So did her Connecticut estate. So did her California mansion by the ocean. Inside those homes, decades of belongings remained untouched fine art, rare dolls and doll houses she had collected since childhood, jewellery, and pieces connected to her father's old collection. She kept paying full staff at properties she would never step inside again. To almost everyone around her, it looked like the fortune her father built had simply gone silent. William Andrews Clark spent his life building something enormous and visible: mansions, mines, railroads, a Senate seat. His daughter spent most of hers making that same fortune invisible. No resolution. Leave the core mystery open, tease follow-up, drive subscribe. Huguette Clark died in 2011 at the age of 104. She left behind a fortune of roughly $300 million, and almost immediately, distant relatives, caretakers and lawyers were fighting over every dollar of it in court. To this day, historians still do not fully agree on why she shut the world out for over 80 years. Grief over her sister, fear after her father's public scandals, something in the family nobody ever spoke about out loud, nobody alive can say for certain, and even now, parts of her father's original art collection have still never been shown to the public. Somewhere, in a vault or a storage room, pieces of the Copper King's empire are still sitting in the dark, waiting. William Andrews Clark built an empire so large it touched copper mines, oil wells, sugar plantations, newspapers, and a city that became Las Vegas. And within one generation, almost all of it disappeared from view, some of it torn down, some of it sold off, and some of it simply locked behind a door that stayed shut for 84 years. If you want to see what happened when that door was finally opened, when investigators finally walked into Huguette Clark's empty rooms, that is where we are going next. Subscribe to the Vertical Archive so you don't miss it.